Welcome everybody to the greatest Node.js tutorials that have ever been made. My name is Bucky Roberts, and in this video series I'm going to be teaching you guys everything you need to know about Node.js. Now, if you're watching this video series, I'm going to assume that you guys have heard of Node.js before, but you may not know exactly what it is. You probably just know that it's becoming really popular and that you can use it to make cool stuff for the internet. But I don't know, maybe you went to your website and you started trying to figure out what it was and you saw this. Alright, scalable applications. Let's see, it's an event-driven non-blocking. Alright, that's confusing. Let me just go and see if I can see what these examples are. Oh, yeah, look at this. Now everything makes sense to me. So, again, going to the website and starting, trying to read everything, they don't really do a great job of explaining what the heck this thing is for a complete beginner. So let me put it in really simple terms. Node.js is a way that you can make really cool server-side applications. And that means that if you want to make, let's say, a website or a chat program or a game or even like a social network, any web application that you can use to actually connect people, Node.js is an awesome choice. Now, if you guys are like, alright, you know what, I already know PHP, for example, sounds like it can do all of those things, so I'll see you later, maybe I'll catch you in another tutorial series. Well, here's the thing. The reason that Node.js is becoming so popular, for one reason, is because it's awesome for real-time stuff. For example, if you were to make a chat application, and of course you would want to be updated in real time, well, PHP isn't that great for those kinds of applications. It's kind of slow and it uses a lot of memory resources and it has a bunch of drawbacks. And again, to explain all of the benefits of Node.js, I'm going to have to show you guys some examples. So the first thing we should do is install this bad boy. So in this video I'll show you guys how to install it for Windows. In the next video I'll show you how to install it for a Mac. So again, you guys probably figured this out. Might as well just click this big green install button to get started. And this is going to give you a MSI file, which is essentially just a wizard. And it's really easy to install actually. So wait till that gets done. Double click it. And do you trust it? Okay, I trust it. Actually, let me minimize out of this. Alright, so right here you pretty much just want to keep all the defaults. Next, let me read through this. Okay, I definitely read all that. Next, it's going to install it in the default location. Do not change this, please. Make sure that it's right in your program files. Next, everything looks good. Next, install. Do we give it permission to? Yes, of course we do. Alright, apparently it completed. Easy as that. Let's go ahead and finish this. And now what do we do? I mean, how do we know for sure that it actually installed? Well, the first and probably the easiest test that you can do is you can actually go to your command line by, if you go to your start menu, and then you can either search for or just type cmd, and that will pretty much open up the command prompt. So what it did whenever it installed it is it set up a system path. So now we can actually run it by just typing the word node. And just to test, again, I know that I'm not explaining the syntax or anything. This is pretty much just to test and make sure that everything is installed properly. But if you type console.log, and inside here you just type something like, I don't know, just type anything you want, bacon. What this means, again, is just print some text out to the console, or in other words, this terminal. So again, don't really worry about the syntax. Just copy this, make sure everything is working. If it's not, then go back and make sure that you kept all the defaults whenever you installed it. But if you see the word bacon undefined, then you're good to go. So of course, what we can do is we can type a bunch of Node.js in this awesome looking, command prompt. But fortunately, they have programs that are a little bit, more aesthetically pleasing than this thing that looks like it was developed in 1940. So first of all, I want to mention that I am a big fan of free IDEs and pretty much software that you can develop Node.js in. However, for this tutorial series, I'm going to be using a JetBrains IDE to type all my code, and I highly recommend it. If you actually buy this, then it is, let's see, $50. But guys, trust me, you guys want to download this IDE. It is hands down the best platform for developing Node.js applications. And I know that everyone has their personal preference. You know, some people like potatoes, some people don't, whatever. But this is not a competition. This is the best. And another thing is for students, or if you're just teaching it or even using it for an open source project, it's completely free. So guys, splooge on this. I know it's 50 bucks like I said, but it's well worth it. If you got to steal some money from your grandma or anything, then that is fine. So download this. Again, if you want to try it free for 30 days, do that. And actually, I don't have this exact IDE installed on my computer. I actually have another IDE from this company, but they're pretty much the exact same thing. Mine is called IntelliJ, but again, if you install it, you're going to see that it's pretty much the same thing. This IDE is more geared towards Java development, but I'm going to show you guys how to install a plugin, and it's pretty much going to give you the exact same functionality as WebStorm. So the first thing we want to do whenever we have our IDE installed is create a new project. So go here, and what we want to choose from here is just a static web application. This is just a blank web application, nothing fancy. It's pretty much like the most basic project that you can make. So I'm going to click next, and from here, again, just choose wherever you want to save it. I am going to save mine in a Node.js file that I already made before this little tutorial, and I'm just going to name my project like Bucky. So I want it to be named Bucky. I'm going to save it in a directory Bucky. Looks good. Finish. Do I want to create it? Yes, I do. And check this out. Alright. Right now we just have a directory called Bucky, which is our main directory. And this folder right here is pretty much just all the settings for JetBrains, your IDE, like your preferences and stuff. We actually never are going to edit anything in here. And this is just a file that references, these are pretty much just JetBrains files that came with your IDE. Nothing to do with Node.js, so don't worry about these or ever worry about touching them. So we pretty much have a blank project, a blank folder with nothing in it. So the first thing, of course, we need to do is create some kind of file. Well, if we right click our main project, we can select new JavaScript file and name this file app.js. So this is going to be our starting point. In other words, whenever we start making Node.js applications, our program is going to look to this file first, and whatever code is in here, it's going to run. So it's like our main file, simple enough. So if I just want to, actually, we'll just do this. So console.log. So just like before, we can type bacon, and if we either right click and run this, check out what happens. So we pretty much have the exact same thing as the command line. However, as you can see, this little environment is a little bit cleaner and gives us a few more tools than that boring black and white command line. So there you go. That is set up and running perfectly. However, there are a few things that I want to take care of. The first thing is this. Whenever we start running actual applications, we of course want to make these for websites most of the time instead of, just having the user use a terminal or command prompt. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go up to this little drop down menu in the top right, and I'm going to choose Edit Configurations. And this is pretty much saying how do you want to set up your program to run. Well, if you click the Browser Live Edit tab, then we can say this. After this program launches, then open it in, and you can choose whatever browser you want. I, of course, am using Chrome as my default. If you don't have it, then Get it? So again, after this launches, then don't just run everything in the terminal. Actually open it up in an actual website. And of course, you can't just open it in Chrome. You need to give it a website to open. So I'll put HTTP localhost, which means my computer, port 8888. So again, whenever we're making Node.js applications, we're gonna have to say that this is the correct port in the correct location, but we'll take care of that whenever I show you guys how to do everything. Just setting everything up now. So just hit apply, OK, and if we run this right now, then it's not going to open in Chrome, and that's because we're not giving it any code to open in Chrome right now, because all this says is print some text out to the terminal, which is this. So I know it's kind of confusing, but you guys are going to see later on whenever we start making actual Node.js apps that it actually makes sense. So one other thing that I want to explain is this. Eventually, when you start typing actual Node.js, you're going to get some warnings from your IDE. So in order to get rid of those warnings, we need to tell IntelliJ, or actually think if you're using WebStorm, then everything is going to run fine. But if you're using another IDE from JetBrains, then this is what you do. You need to go to File, Settings, and first of all, you need to install the Node.js plugin. So like I said, this WebStorm right here, if I actually just click it, it's already set up for Node.js. However, if you have, I don't know, another product like IntelliJ, this is mostly, as you can see, for Java. However, you can tweak it to pretty much use with Node.js. So this is how you do that. You go to the plugins and type in Node.js. Now you're going to see a plugin called Node.js, which pretty much means I want to be able to write Node.js code in this piece of software. So you install that. I of course already have it installed, so that's why it says uninstall for me. But you will see a thing that says install. Click that, and once it's installed, this is another thing you need to do. Actually, you could have kept that open, but if you go to File, Settings, you can click Languages and Frameworks, expand JavaScript right here, and click on Libraries. Now, as you can see, we now have a few additional libraries that is capable of understanding. So we want to just enable Node.js and Node.js globals, again the core modules and globals. And again, you don't really have to worry about exactly what this is right now. We're just telling our program that says, hey, whenever we start typing Node.js code, don't get tweaked out and freak out because you don't understand what it is. So those libraries, whenever we enable them, it just says be aware that we're going to be developing Node.js in here. That's it. So now we are good to go. Again, in the next tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to set it up on a Mac, and also if you guys want to use a free IDE, I'm going to show you guys how to download and install Sublime to use with Node.js. So it's going to be cool. I'll see you then. Alright guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to install Node.js and set it up on a Mac. It's actually really easy. You could probably figure it out yourself, but let's go ahead and do it. So click install. Do we want to go ahead and keep it? Yes, of course. That's what we're trying to do. It downloads real quick, so double click this package that you just installed. And by the way, the website is https://nodejs.org, so make sure you're on that website. Alright. So this is just a wizard. If you watched my last tutorial, actually you probably didn't because that was for Windows, but it's really easy. Just click continue. Okay, make sure you read all that. Continue. Do you agree to it? Yep. And install this. Alright, so that is it. So let's go ahead and close out of that. And just like the last tutorial, now since it installed a path variable, what we can do is we can open up our terminal, and if you can't see it, then if you go to Finder, and let me just go to Applications, it's in, hold on a second, make sure you guys can see what's going on. Alright, so if you go to your Applications, inside Utilities, you're going to see a program called Terminal. Now double click that, but I already have it open, so there you go. So from here, you can just type Node, if you spell it correctly, wow, Node, and then just to test that anything, put like console log like tuna. So press enter and it says tuna undefined. That's good. That's what we wanted to see. It means that everything is installed and working correctly. So now let me quit this terminal, close, and check it out. So again, we obviously don't want to develop or write all of our code in that terminal. So what you can use, and what a lot of people use, is actually this program right here called Sublime Text. It's a text editor and it's completely free. Again, I highly recommend using WebStorm from JetBrains, but if you want a free one, then you can just go ahead and download this. It's really easy to download and install too. So download this. Dun, 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 dun. All right, double click this. And now if we double click it to open it, check out, all right, are we sure we want to open it? All right, don't warn me. Actually, we'll keep that just in case and open. And let me clean all this up. And now we have Sublime. So the first thing I want to do is actually just make a new file. And let me save this as, I'm going to store it right on my desktop. I have a directory called Bucky. Make sure that you save a file called app.js. And just like before, this is our main JavaScript file or Node.js file. It's going to look to first whenever it's running our Node.js applications. So again, like I said, our main file. Save it. Now, just to test everything real quick, I'm going to put console log, and I'll just write like bacon. Actually, let me put, yeah, bacon. I think I said tuna before. All right, so now make sure I save everything, and now open up our terminal again. And if I go to CD, desktop, Bucky, that's going to move me into this directory right here. And if we press LS real quick, we can verify that this right here lists all of the files in your directory. So we can see that we have one file that we just created, app.js. Now in order to run this, all we do is type node app.js. Now we hit enter and check it out. It just logs out or prints out bacon to the terminal. Beautiful, everything is working awesome. Now again, if you want to go ahead and continue using Sublime, feel free, everything is going to work great. However, one more time, I'm going to recommend WebStorm. That's what I'm going to be using in the future tutorials. But yeah, either way, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Alright, Hosses, welcome back to another Node.js tutorial. And before we get started, I need to tell you a story. Nothing to do with Node.js, but I need to get it out. So I was at the grocery store yesterday, and I was checking out, and the cashier, she was a pretty cute girl actually. She was like, making small talk, this and that. And eventually she asked me what I did for work, and I go, I'm a programmer. You? And then I realized that I just asked the cashier what she did for work, and then I realized that I am an idiot, and my face got red, and I tried to avoid eye contact. So yeah, pretty embarrassing. Again, that wasn't like a story into what I'm going to teach you right now, just something embarrassing that happened to me. So let's get started. Now, in this tutorial, what I want to do is I want to cover some basics of JavaScript. This isn't really specific to Node.js, but these are some concepts that are really important and we're gonna come across a lot in Node.js. So again, I know this isn't a JavaScript tutorial, but these are really important to understand right now. So the first piece of information is this. Whenever you make objects in Node.js, they're the exact same as JavaScript. So for example, you can have like first name, Bucky. This person object can also have a property of last name, and I'll set that equal to Roberts. Make sure you separate these with a comma, and we'll just say something like age 28. Alright, so again, what you can do is you can actually call console log and just print out this entire object, and what's going to do is just print out the properties. Make sure you have your semicolons in there. Nothing new. Now another thing I want to point out is this. So whenever you're typing JavaScript, it's pretty much just code that runs in your browser. It runs, unless you have like a while loop in there, it just completes and it's done. However, this code right here, think of it as code that's going to run on your server. So it's a little bit different. Any Node.js code is going to run on your server, and it's going to run continuously. So this process is still going on until we stop it. Now, if you try to run this again, I already set it up, so it says, are you sure you want to run this again because you already have a process running? I set it up to just reboot it, but again, think of it like that. Again, all this code is going to run on your server. It's server-side code. Alright, so now that we got that taken care of, another thing I want to point out is this. So, say that you have a function called add numbers, and you just try to add two numbers together, A and B, and of course, this just returns A plus B. So in Node.js, console.log, what two numbers? 7 and 3. Alright. So whenever you have a function and you try to log it out, what it's going to do is it prints out the return data. So again, whenever I run this, it's going to print out 10. So again, any function you print out, one more time, it's going to return, or it's going to print out the return data. Simple enough. So why do I say that? Well, there's gonna come, let's say that we have a function called like worthless, and it doesn't take any parameters because all this function does is nothing at all. So let me just call worthless. Alright, so this function right here, check out what's happening. It doesn't have any return value, any return statement. So whenever we try to run this and print it out, this function is going to be equal to undefined. So that's another concept that we're going to come across a lot. Any function without an explicit return statement, like this, it's always going to return undefined. So you actually saw that before whenever we just log something out, like in our very first tutorial. Ugh. What the heck was that? Alright. Kind of embarrassing there. Alright. So, you know, in our very first tutorial, when we were just printing stuff out on the screen to test everything out, you saw that. That is why. Now, one other thing I want to show you guys is this. What you can do is you can actually have a variable, and we'll just say print bacon, and you can set a variable equal to an anonymous function. So say that we had a function, and we'll just make a really simple, stupid function. And what's this function gonna do? We'll just print something out. So console log bacon is healthy. Don't believe the doctors. Might as well capitalize that, make this a little bit more formal. Alright, so we pretty much have a function that prints something out, semicolon right there. And what we're doing is this. We're taking this entire function and we're setting it equal to the print bacon variable. So now we can just do something like print bacon, and look what's happening. So of course, whenever you run this, you know what's going to happen. It's going to print out bacon is healthy, don't believe the doctors, whatever. But the point is, we really don't need a name for this function. So most of the time whenever we create functions, we have a name so we can reference them and use them where we want them, obviously. However, there really isn't a point to giving this function a name, so in Node.js, we don't need to do that. This is called an anonymous function, and another cool concept is we can actually take these functions and assign them to variables just like we would, you know, like a number or a string or anything like that. And of course, why would we want to do this? Well, one cool thing that we can do is this. Whenever we have a function stored in a variable, we can actually use this and pass them to other functions. So set timeout is a function I'm going to be talking to you guys about a lot in the next tutorial, but check this out. We can actually pass print bacon in there and put like 5,000 or something. And again, I'm going to be talking to you guys about what set timeout means, but it pretty much means call this code in 5 seconds. So when I run this, of course, this print bacon is going to run first immediately, it's going to wait 5 seconds, and then it's going to call this print bacon from set timeout. So what am I trying to demonstrate here? Not printing crap out on the screen. I just want to show you guys that you can actually take functions, assign them to variables, and the benefit of this is we can actually use these inside other functions, and you're going to be seeing that a lot later on. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and well, see you later. Alright guys, listen up. It is story time, and yes, if you're wondering, this story is 100% true. Do not question it. I assure you that this all really happened. Alright, so a while ago, I used to have a restaurant, and this restaurant was actually really popular because I had this awesome chef right here. This guy name is Chef Database. Now Chef Database is awesome because he can cook an egg in 5 seconds. That's actually the only thing my restaurant sold, eggs. Again, don't question this. Alright, so I had 2 employees, Chef Database, cooking eggs in 5 seconds, and I also hired a server. So she was responsible for taking orders from the customers. So we opened up our first day, and pretty much this is how it went. The server was ready to take orders, and this girl, first of all, why does this girl look so sad? I don't know. Maybe she, maybe her boyfriend broke up with her or something. I don't know. But anyway, she was like, I'll take 1 egg, please. And then my server was like, okay, hey, Chef DB, we need 1 egg. So he waits 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when it's done, the server brings the egg to the customer. Boom, you're good to go. So she got her egg. She's at the door. Next customer is this little boy. So this little boy's like, hey, I would take 1 of the eggs. And my server's like, you talk funny. Whatever, dude. Alright, chef. Need 1 more egg. Alright, that'll be 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, you little turd. Here is your egg. He's happy. Whatever. See you later. So day 2 rolls around, and obviously my restaurant is getting pretty popular because who doesn't love delicious eggs? And I realize that I need to get these customers their orders faster. They're getting a little upset that their orders are taking too long, even though my eggs are delicious. So I'm like, what the heck am I supposed to do? And then my grandma's like, oh, Bucky, why don't you just hire some more servers? I'm like, Grandma, please, shut up. Listen, I sell eggs for a living. This is my restaurant. Do you think I'm rich? I can't afford more servers. So I need to find a better way or a faster way to get these customers their order. So I'm like, you know what? Where is the flaw in my business plan? Well, check it out. Whenever a customer places an order from the server, this server walks over, tells the chef, and he starts cooking the egg. Now, while he's cooking the egg, this server, like a lazy bum, is just sitting there doing nothing, filing her nails, checking her iPhone, whatever. Now, I come up with an idea that says, you know what? Why don't we manage it this way? Why doesn't the server take the orders, tell the chef to start cooking the egg, and then what she can do, instead of standing around, she can take another order from, say, the boy. And then she can tell the chef to start cooking another egg, and boom, check it out. So again, my server has no point of standing here taking 1 order at a time and waiting 5 seconds to go back and take another order. Chef doesn't need her. So instead, what we start doing is that your order, okay, she placed her order. What about you, little boy? What's your order? Oh, an egg too? Obviously, because it's the only thing we sell. I guess, she really doesn't need to be asking what they want to eat, but whatever. And she does the same thing for the priest. So she just took 3 orders, went back, back, back. Now the chef is cooking 3 eggs at a time, and instead of standing there waiting for 1 egg to be done at a time, she just tells the chef, hey, Chef Database, whenever those eggs are done, just let me know. Just give me a heads up and I'll come back and get them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yo, server, all the eggs are done. Boom, there you go. So now instead of taking 15 seconds for 3 customers, she can take orders immediately, and the chef can cook all the eggs at once, and they each get their eggs in 5 seconds. What if I had 30 customers? Doesn't matter. They all get their eggs in 5 seconds instead of 150. Pretty cool. My server is staying busy the whole time. I don't spend extra money on extra servers, and it's a much more efficient way of doing things. Now, believe it or not, that story has absolutely nothing to do with Node.js or programming. Just thought it was a pretty cool story to tell, so thank you guys for watching. Actually, I'm kidding, of course. The reason that I told you guys that story is pretty much the reason that Node.js is becoming so popular. As you can see, whenever you're making some kind of web app that has to deal with A, real-time data in pretty much applications where speed is important, and B, applications like social networks where you have a lot of requests coming in at once, Node.js is incredibly fast and efficient. So instead of just talking about those eggs, let's go ahead and start learning how this is done in code. Now, of course, whenever we're making a website or a social network, we obviously aren't cooking eggs. That time-consuming operation, that 5 seconds it took for that chef to cook an egg, this would be something like querying a database. Now, querying a database and having the database calculate all its stuff, of course, takes some time. So if you had a bunch of people trying to connect to your website, and every single client had to wait for the other client before them to get done, obviously it would be a horrible experience. Your website would be really slow and people would never come back. So instead, if we set it up like Node.js, we'll be golden. Alright, so I'm going to have two functions in here. My first function is just going to be called place and order. So this we're just going to pass in an order number so we can keep track of everything. So this is pretty much going to resemble a user trying to connect to your website to, I don't know, like query a database, get some kind of data. They want to place an order, they want to get data from your website. So inside here, the first thing I'm just going to make is a little indicator so we can see in the log that this was actually called. So I'll put like customer order, and then we'll print out their order number. So again, we're going to be calling this function like, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. We'll say like 6 or 7 times. So every time we call it, it'll say customer. The heck? Do you hear that? There's like a random motorcycle driving out. Alright. So anyways, every time we call this, it's going to say customer order 1, customer order 2, customer order 3, so on and so forth. Simple enough. Now, after we print out the little indicator saying that this function was called, we need to call one more function, and this is going to resemble querying the database. In other words, the example we saw, we'll say cook and deliver food. Now this is going to take one parameter called a callback, and let me just say this. I'll be like simulate a 5 operation. Alright. So this function right here would resemble something like connecting to your database, some time-consuming operation. So inside here, I'm going to write one piece of code, and that is set timeout. And of course, it takes the callback and just have some time from like 1,000 to 10,000. If I put 5,000 in here, it just means 5 seconds. So what the heck is this? So again, obviously we don't really have a database to connect to, but what's going to happen is after 5 seconds, it's going to throw your callback. What the heck is a callback? You know, in our example, whenever we had the server, and she went and she gave the order to the chef, and instead of just standing there like a lazy bum like she was doing at first, she was just like, hey chef, call me back whenever the eggs are ready, and that way I can go do something else, something useful, something productive. So I'm going to give you my order, go do something else, just call me back whenever that's ready. Much more efficient, and that's what this callback is. It's a bit of code that's going to run whenever your 5 seconds is up, and you guys are going to see in like half a second what's going on. Alright, so obviously whenever a user places an order, we're just going to print something out, and then we're going to call cook and deliver food. So cook and deliver food. So The reason that I had to explain in the last tutorial that you can actually have functions and pass them in as parameters to other functions is this. This callback is essentially a bit of code that we want to run after 5 seconds. So we can actually put an anonymous function in here, function, and run some bit of code. So after the food is cooked and delivered, we're just going to say console.log, and we'll just log out something like, I don't know, delivered food order, and then we will put the order number. So again, if you don't quite understand exactly what's going on, then give me 1 second and I promise you will by the end of this video. Alright, so now we have to do is just place a whole bunch of orders, and I'll just put like a simulate like users like web request. Alright, so place an order 1 and just copy this a bunch of times. We'll say like 5 or 6 times. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright. So again, this is just going to simulate 6 different users trying to place orders, trying to connect to your database or your website at a time. Now let's run this and see what happens. Alright, all of their orders are placed. They all want data. 5 seconds later, look at that. So check it out. Querying the database takes 5 seconds. Nothing we can do about that. It's just a database. It crunches numbers. Some things take time. However, we had a bunch of users trying to connect to our database, and instead of taking 5 seconds, waiting for the next one, 5 seconds, we could process all of their requests at the exact same time and then send back all of their data in 5 seconds. So every single user was getting the best possible experience. Now at first, you might look at this program and you start scratching your head because something doesn't look quite right. You see, we know that computer programs run top down. In other words, this line of code is going to complete, and then once it's done, it's going to run this line of code. Once that's done, it's going to run this, 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 and this. So how is it that when we run this program, essentially it looks like all of these are printing out like a millisecond after another? Because whenever a user places an order, here's what's happened. It prints out this, as we know, nothing new, and then it hops down and it pretty much starts requesting data from the database. Now this process takes 5 seconds. Alright, so if that's still going on and this line of code didn't get done yet, then why are we able to hop down to 2, then 3, then 4, then 5? Aren't we still waiting 5 seconds for the database to be dealt with? Well, that's what confuses a lot of people, and that's what I want to clear up. This line of code, set timeout, it's not saying wait 5 seconds, pause the program, stop the program for 5 seconds, and then once you're done, call back the callback method, which just says deliver food. What's happening in this set timeout method is this. What you're doing is you're scheduling this callback or this bit of code to run in 5 seconds. Now, just to make that schedule, it doesn't take 5 seconds, it's instant. So you're just saying, hey database, do your thing, do whatever you got to do, however long it takes. When you're done with that, call me back. In the meantime, I'm going to go on and continue with the rest of the program. So do your thing, I'm going to go on, handle some more users, and then when you're done, after 5 seconds or whatever long operation you take, just call back this function. So again, you're not getting this line of code or point in your program and pausing before going on to the rest of the program. You're setting a schedule. So again, I know it confuses a lot of people, but hopefully I was able to explain it. If you have any questions at all about anything, or if this seems kind of fuzzy right now, I am certain in the upcoming tutorials that you guys are going to catch on to this concept real quick. Also, if you have questions about anything specific, then you can just ask me on my forum. There are a lot of people there willing and able to help. And lastly, if you want any of this source code from this tutorial or any of my future tutorials, I'm going to be putting it on my GitHub for free. There you go. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Alright guys, let's go ahead and talk about the this keyword. THIS. I'm sure you've seen it before, and a lot of people seem to be kind of confused by it. So I'll explain it really easily. Whenever you see the keyword this, it just refers to the thing that called it. So that's even more confusing. So let's go ahead and look at an example and it'll be a lot more clear. So say that we have a object Bucky, and I'm just gonna throw a real quick, I don't know, I'll make like a function like print first name. Let me add my semicolon. Alright, so we're gonna have one single function in here, a function. And what is this function gonna do? Well, it's just gonna log out two pieces of information. The first thing is we'll just say something stupid like my name is Bucky, just so this function doesn't feel completely worthless. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out one more thing right after this. I'm going to have a test, and I'm going to say, is this equal to Bucky? So let me type one line of code and I'll show you guys what's going on. If we take this object, Bucky right here, and we call the function print first name, remember that I told you guys in the very beginning of this tutorial, this keyword right here is just a reference to whatever thing is calling it. So of course we can see print first name, what's calling it? Well, Bucky's calling it. So this test is going to print out true. Simple enough. Of course it logs my name is Bucky, and of course it logs true right there. So again, one more time, this is just a reference to whatever thing or whatever object is calling it. Of course, we can see really clearly that Bucky is calling print first name. So that's easy enough to understand. I mean, it's right there in front of us. The only thing people get a little bit confused about is this. What happens when we make a function, if I type it correctly, alright. What happens when we make a function that isn't clearly part of any objects? So like do something worthless. So we're making this function, and okay, it's not really like part or inside of any object. So if we were to start logging some crap out, let me just put a little indicator, be like I'm worthless, just so we have some text to print out. What happens is this. The default calling context, I'll actually write this, the default calling context is global. What this means is if we build a function and it doesn't belong to any object, it's global, which pretty much means your main entire program is going to call it. So this is no longer equal to Bucky. I'll just test if it's equal to global. So I'm going to call do something worthless and check out what happens. So of course, just like before, we kept that, already explained it. Now when we call do something worthless, it's not being called by an object like Bucky was calling print first name. It's being called by, I don't know what's it being called by, like the main program. Well, that refers to global. So that's why whenever we test it, this is equal to global. So again, one more time, this, like I said, is just a reference to whatever thing is calling it. It can be an explicit object, like we can see here, Bucky, or we can just call it through our main program, which means global, the global program. Simple enough. Thank you guys for watching, and probably gonna go eat some Hot Pockets now. See you guys next time. Alright guys, so before we get into the really fun Node.js stuff, I want to explain one more concept that seems to confuse a lot of people, and that is the idea of prototyping. Now, you guys are going to come across this a lot in Node.js, so I figured I might as well take a tutorial and explain pretty much the bare bones basics of what prototyping is. So essentially, what prototyping gives you the ability to do is you can add cool methods or properties to your objects and classes. So say that we're making a game, and the first thing we need in the game is a couple users. So I don't know, what's every user have? We'll say like a name and a life. We'll say that they can like fight each other, whatever. So this name, we'll just set it equal to blank by default. And again, remember that this keyword refers to whatever object is calling it, whatever thing is calling this. So now we can actually have a bunch of different instances of user. Each one can have their own name. So we can have a Bucky, a Wendy, a Tuna McGee, a bunch of different users. So yeah, there you go, simple enough. And we'll just give them each a life to start out of, I don't know, like 100 points or 100 life or whatever. So by default, we thought it was a good idea if users could give each other life. I don't know, maybe they're her or something. So we'll say that this give life equals a new function called give life, and of course you would need a target player. So for example, if my friend Wendy was hurt, I could give her life, and I don't know, if she had like 10 life, now she would have 11. If she had 17, she would have 18, whatever. So how do we do that? Pretty easy. Target player life plus equal 1. And might as well just print something out. Console log. I'll say like after I give a life to Wendy, I'll say Bucky gave 1 life to Wendy. So of course this name, which would be whatever called this function, which would be in this case Bucky, gave 1 life to, not game 1 life, gave 1 life to target player dot name. Alright, so whenever I give a life to Wendy, it's going to say Bucky, since I called give life, gave 1 life to the target player, and of course it would increase her life by 1. Nothing that revolutionary right there. So now that we got our basic user class out of the way, let's actually go ahead and start making some users. So Bucky equals new user, and var Wendy equals new user. Alright, we have 2 users, but remember, whenever we create a new user, they don't have any name. They have a default life of 100, but their name is blank. So let's set their name right now, and that is Bucky dot name, set equal to Bucky, and Wendy dot name, set this equal to Wendy. Alright, so now we have 2 users and they both have names. Let me tighten that up a tidbit and check it out. So we start playing the game or whatever, and I decide right off the bat that I want to give a life to Wendy. Might as well, she's my friend, nothing else to do in this game. So Bucky dot give life to Wendy. Alright, looking pretty cool. And just to verify, you know, just to look at our different lives, right after, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out our life. So we'll say that like Bucky I'll print out my life and then hers. Wendy and Wendy life. Alright, so we start playing and check it out. Right off the bat, I give 1 life to Wendy. My life is still 100 and her life is 101. Easy enough, simple enough to understand. What the heck is a prototype? Still don't quite get that concept. So I give this game to my boss, who wants the greatest game ever, and he's like, you know what, Bucky? This is a pretty cool game. However, wouldn't it be cool if instead of just giving life to your friends, because that's kind of boring, wouldn't it be cool if users could actually start hurting each other? Because hurting people is always fun, right? So I'm like, you know what? That would be kind of cool. So I'm going to make a new function called uppercut. And whenever you uppercut someone, it takes 3 points away from them. So what you can do through prototypes is this. If you call user prototype right there, you can actually put something called uppercut. Of course, I'm making uppercut up. You can put whatever variable name you want. And you can set this equal to a new uppercut function. So now target player is gonna pretty much work the same. So actually, let me just copy all this. All right. So instead of giving one to them, let's take away how many. Uppercutting someone, I think, takes away 3 lives of them. And then we'll say gave 1 life to, we'll change that to just uppercutted. Alright. So what we can do is we can pretty much use prototypes to add additional methods or functions onto this user object or this user class. So now every instance of this user class has access to this new cool uppercut function. Don't believe me? Well, check this out. I gave a life to Wendy before. She, for some reason, hates when I give life to her. Maybe she just hates me. I don't know. So she decides to uppercut me. So Wendy dot uppercut Bucky. Alright, that was very cool. Now let's just print out their lives again. So check this out. I'm going to run this bad boy. I gave 1 life to Wendy. She got ticked off for some reason. She uppercutted me. It took 3 points away from me, and she still has the life I gave her. So, you know, she's kind of a little turd nugget, but whatever. So again, that's one concept of prototyping. What we can do is we can add special methods or properties to objects in classes, in other words, our user class. So this was an example of adding a function. And by the way, if I ever say method or function, they're pretty much the same thing in this tutorial, although they technically are different. I know, so don't, you know, leave 1,000 comments. All right. So I give this to my boss, and he's like, "This is awesome. I love hurting people. Uppercutting is always, you know, humorous." However, I think we got to spice this game up a little bit more. We actually want to add magic to every user. So in addition to adding functions, like I said, you can also take that user class, and through prototyping, you can call, if I type, got the hiccups now, great. You can add a new property called magic, and we'll set every user's magic to like 60 by default. So now let me just console.log this out. Bucky.magic. This is going to log out 60 for every user. I just want to demonstrate that. And console log Wendy.magic. So let me add a comment real quick. I'll say can add properties to all objects, and I'll also say you can add functions. Alright, so let me print this out just to show you guys what it works. Alright, so this was before, and now we see whenever we print out Bucky's magic and Wendy's magic, they both have 60. So there you go. That is pretty much what prototyping is. Now the last thing you may be wondering is this. Alright, so I know that with prototyping, what you can do is you can add functions and properties to objects. But why the heck would you do it this way when you can just build everything right inside here? It seems like it would be a much better option. Doesn't really make sense right now. However, in the future, that's what I'm going to explain, because this tutorial is already 10 minutes long, and I'm worried about Wendy uppercutting me again. So anyways, for now that you understand the basics of it, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, yada yada, tomato tomato. See you next time. Alrighty guys, welcome back, and in this video, what I want to do is I want to start talking to you about something called modules. So eventually, whenever you write an actual piece of software, an actual web app, it's going to be pretty long, either hundreds of lines of code or maybe even thousands of lines of code. So obviously, as you guys could probably already figure out, if you just started typing all that code and all of it was in the same file, then first of all, this file is going to get really cluttered, really messy, really difficult to work with. So what we can do instead is we can actually take that code and break it up into different files. Now in Node.js, these different files are called modules. And it's not just having a bunch of code and randomly taking a chunk of it and sticking it in another file. What you do whenever you make different modules is you group similar code together. So say that you're making a web app and I don't know, like maybe it was a website and you had a section where a user could look at music and another one for movies and another one for TV shows. Well, you would want to take all the movie related code and break it up into its own file. So that way everything isn't jumbled all together. So let's actually go ahead and make a quick example. So as you guys can probably already expect, whatever file app.js is in, right click the directory and hit new JavaScript file. And you can name it anything you want. I'm going to name mine movies.js. So again, this movies.js file would be a separate module. So what we would want to do here is any movie related code we would want to stick in here, and the rest of our program can go in another file. So just so I have something, I'm just going to make a real quick function. I'll just like print out two different movies. So print avatar console.log, and I'll print out like the name and the rating. Alright, so avatar PG-13, I think it's PG-13, and let's make one more. So function, I'll print Chappie. By the way, I think I saw this. I think I said this. I saw Chappie the other night, and pretty good movie. Highly recommended. So Chappie, and I believe this is rated R. I think so. I remember they said the F word a couple times, so whatever. Alright. So here's the thing. We have a couple different files, and they each have a little bit of code related to, whatever the file is. And we want to pretty much take this code and use it in our main file or include it in a different file. So how do we do that? Well, but the correct terminology is what we're doing is we're going to export some code from movies and import it into app.js. So that's what we're trying to do, take this code and include it right here. Now here's the thing. Whenever we do this, all this code just doesn't get exported by default. We can actually say what code do we want to export. Now the code that gets exported is determined by a variable called module.exports. Now once you type this keyword, what you can do is you can tack on a variable, and this can just be any custom variable you want. So I'm going to say that I'm going to export this avatar function, and I'm not going to export this Chappie one. Maybe I want this Chappie one to be private. Maybe I'm still working on it. Anyways, it's not ready to use in another file. So anyways, I'm going to make a variable called avatar, and you just set this equal to whatever you want to export. So print avatar, and you don't have the parentheses, so there you go. So now whenever something tries to import movies.js, it says okay, whenever I'm trying to import this, you obviously only want to export this function right here. So that's that. And let's see how to import it. So whenever you're importing another module, what you do is you set it equal to a variable. So I'm going to set this equal to movies, and after that you use the require keyword, which is pretty much saying we are requiring a module. We are requiring a file to include in this one. So the parameter that this takes is this, period / movies. Now what this syntax, it may look a little confusing, so I'll break it down. This dot / this is just a syntax that says look in the same directory that I am at for a file called movies. So we obviously know app.js is in this directory, public, so it's going to scan this directory and it's going to look for a file called movies.js. If you're like, Bucky, you forgot to type the JS extension, might fix that for you. Actually, whenever you're importing modules, never include the .js extension. And this is to do with a couple different things. First of all, this is kind of background information and you really don't need to know it, but some of your systems get confused by the file extensions because like a browser can't have access to your file system, so it doesn't really do a good job of looking at the extensions. And also another thing I want to point out while I'm talking about this, You guys may be like, alright, so what's the point of this dot forward slash? Can I just write movies? Well, later on, I'm going to show you guys how to import something called core modules, which is essentially modules that are already built into the language for you. And whenever you import core modules, that's when you use just the plain keyword instead of the path. So again, just remember right now, whenever you want to import a module, what you're going to do is you're going to use the require keyword, and then the path in the dot forward slash means look in the same directory, and do not include the .js extension. So again, what this line of code does is it says, okay, I'm going to require code from this file, so it's going to hop over to this file, go do. Alright, what are you trying to export? This right here. I'm going to grab everything right here and pretty much plop it in this variable. So now with this movies variable, remember this is essentially equal to the other module. Remember, we made a variable called avatar, which was a function, and we can run it just like expected. So again, whenever you run app.js, since it imported everything we told it to export from movies.js, it works fine. And obviously, here's the thing. Let me adjust my seat a little bit. So since we only chose to export avatar and not print Chappie, if we ever try to do something like movies.print Chappie, that's not going to work. So this is essentially the same as having public and private methods. So maybe this, I don't know, maybe you only wanted to access this function from inside this module. So that is how you can accomplish that. So that is the bare basics of modules, but there's actually a lot more to cover. So now that we understand the basics, we can hop into the little more detailed stuff, and I'll show you guys some other cool ways and maybe easier ways to export and import modules. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, yada yada, tomato tomato. See you next time. Alrighty guys, welcome back, and in this video what I want to do is show you guys an additional way that you can export modules. And there are actually a couple different ways, but this is one of the more common ones. So I figured if you ever saw the syntax, then it wouldn't, throw you off. So we learned before that anytime we want to export a bit of code from a module, then we use this module.exports variable, and we gave pretty much our variable custom name and value, which in this case was equal to a function. Now, just like before, if we wanted to say export this Chappie function as well, then we can give it a name of Chappie, and that would be equal to print Chappie. Simple enough. Now, this may be kind of confusing, and you may be looking at this saying, okay, this is kind of repetitive because we're typing our code right here, and then we have to go ahead and pretty much type it all again whenever we say we're going to export it. Wouldn't it be better if we had a more efficient way of doing this? Well, check this out. I'm going to delete this code. Actually, let me leave it right there for right now. Alright. So to clear things up, let me explain it like this. This module that exports, this is actually an object, and in every single file that you create, it actually has a module dot, if I could type it, it actually has a module.exports object by default. So again, whenever you first create a module, what Node.js does is it throws this in, even though it's kind of behind the scenes, and it sets this equal to a blank object. So what we were doing in the last tutorial is we were pretty much adding name and value pairs to this object. So then whenever we wanted to import it, it goes and it looks for this object, and whatever's inside it, in this case avatar and print chapter function, then that's how it knows what it wants to export or import, if you're looking at it from the other point of view. However, since we know that now, what we can actually do, instead of just writing our functions and then saying we want to export them one by one, we can actually write our functions directly inside this object. So how do we do that? Well, check it out. Of course, every function, and we can also export variables too, just like a JSON object, it has a name, value, pair. So if we want to make that print avatar function, we would just call it something like print avatar and set it equal to an anonymous function, and it will just be like console.log, and I'll just write the name avatar. too lazy to type all the ratings and stuff. Alright. So again, what this would do is essentially the same exact thing. We could use, actually let me just go ahead and demonstrate this right now. So now what we're doing is we're saying this is the code that we want to export. Pretty convenient because we only had to write this function one time. So now we can just say movies, print avatar, and check it out. It would print out avatar. Now we can also do this with additional functions. Let's say we had a couple functions in here. Maybe print Chappie. Chappie, we can use that as well. And also, let me clean this up a little bit. And also, if we just wanted to export plain variables. So say that we had a variable called like favorite movie or fave movie, and we set this equal to like, I don't know, like the matrix. Then we can do that as well. So again, what we're saying right here is any code inside this object is what gets exported whenever we try to import it somewhere else. So now we can just, I don't know, do something like console log movies.favemovie, and that'll work as well. So again, that's what's going on behind the scenes. Anytime that you create a module, it gives you a blank module.exports object by default, and you can populate it with whatever you want, functions, variables, whatever. So hopefully you guys understand a little bit better, and if you guys prefer this method, then feel free to use it. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, see you later. Alright guys, so in this video what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna explain what exactly a shared module or a shared object is. It's something that confuses a lot of people whenever they start using modules. So yeah, let's go ahead and get to it. And actually what I did is I cleaned out everything from the previous tutorial. So right now we just have a blank app.js and a blank movies.js file. And I'm gonna say this. So I'm gonna make a new JavaScript file or module called Emily.js. I'm going to make another one called Bucky.js. Now say that we're making some kind of weird movie app. Let me clean all these comments up. So say that we were making some kind of weird movie app, maybe like a movie website, and we have two users, Emily and Bucky, and they can like set their favorite movies. So maybe Emily's favorite movie is The Notebook, and Bucky's is, what's my favorite movie? Good Will Hunting. Alright. So in movies, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to use module exports like we learned before, and we're just going to make one variable called fave movie, and by default we'll just set it to a blank value. So fave movie is blank by default, but of course Emily and Bucky can change this to their favorite movies. So how do we do that? Well, let's hop over in Emily, and we're just going to make a variable called movies and set this equal to require movies. Alright, so now we imported everything that we wanted to. So now what we can do is we can take movies and we can set fave movie equal to anything that Emily wants, like The Notebook. Alright, everything is running good so far, and now let me just log it out to verify. So I'll say something like Emily's favorite movie is movies, holy crap, sausage finger, movies fave movie. Alright, so nothing revolutionary here. What we did is we made a really simple movies module, and then what Emily's going to do is she's going to import that module, set her favorite movie to the notebook, and then it's just going to print it out. So now let's do the same thing for Bucky. So we can just copy that, and actually I'm going to delete this middle line of code because that's what I want to demonstrate. So Bucky's going to import this module as well. However, I'm not going to set my favorite movie. I'm just going to leave it blank. So you may be like, alright, Emily's is going to be in the notebook. As we can clearly see, Bucky's is going to be blank, so it's going to print out Bucky's favorite movie is nothing. And that's that. So now in our app.js, remember, this is our starting point. and all we have to do here is this. We can actually just require Emily and Bucky as well. So again, what this is going to do is just going to require these, actually they were lowercase, those two modules. So check this out. Alright, so it says Emily's favorite movie is The Notebook. As we can see, obviously nothing revolutionary or new there. Bucky's favorite movie is The Notebook. What the heck? Wait a minute. I'm looking at this code and yeah, I clearly did not set my favorite movie to The Notebook. What the heck is going on? There must be a bug with Node.js. Well, this is what I want to explain in this tutorial. Whenever you use modules in Node.js, the default behavior is to share this module among every other file that imports it. Now, what that means is that Emily, she is actually changing this object directly, and then Bucky gets the same changes as well. So they don't each get a copy of this, they're actually all referencing this exact same module. Now, believe it or not, this may be the functionality that you want. For example, say that all of these users were in a chat room and instead of movies, this was like the chat log. Obviously, they would all be looking at the same chat log. And this is actually much better for performance and memory because instead of every single different module making a copy, they all just reference the same one. So again, for performance, memory, it's a lot faster, a lot more efficient, but obviously, as you can tell, in some applications, this isn't the behavior that you want. So if you do, then go ahead and use this style, but in the next tutorial, what I'm going to show you guys how to do is make something called object factories, and essentially what that does is it gives Emily and Bucky their own copy of this module. So yeah, for now, thank you guys for watching. See you next time. Alright guys, so what we saw in the last video is the default behavior for Node.js is this. Anytime you export an object from a module, that object gets shared among every other module. Now that's going to be great in a lot of cases, but not in this example where we actually want to have Emily have her own movie, her own favorite movie, Bucky has his own favorite movie, and every other user can have their own favorite movie and not have just one that is shared among them all. So anytime we want to create a new object, we actually need to export a function that creates a new object. Sounds kind of weird, but this is what an object factory is. It's basically an object that creates another object. Sounds kind of weird, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. So instead of setting it equal to just a plain object like before, we actually set this equal to, I can never spell function. Function, just like that. Let me add my semicolons. Alright. So what this function is going to do is actually return a new object every single time. And I'll just put like fave movie. So again, everything inside here is just like before, except now we're throwing it inside a function that returns it. So this is what an object factory is. Essentially, it's an object, module exports, but what this object does is it creates other objects by use of this function. Simple enough. So now what we can do is we can hop back in to Emily, and let me just clean this up. Actually, let me clean this up too. Alright, so again, they're both going to require this module still, nothing new there. So anytime you want to use this, the first thing you need is some object like Emily, we'll call it Emily's movies. And you set it equal to movies. So now this is an object, and you can use it to pretty much call anything inside here. For example, we'll just set her favorite movie, Emily's movies, fave movie, set it equal to the notebook. So just like, you know, the behavior you would expect. So now if we just take console log, what we can do is we can print out like before, Emily's favorite movie is Emily's movies dot fave movie, and we'll do the same thing with Bucky. except we will say Bucky's movies, and we'll actually just won't even set Bucky's favorite movie so you guys can clearly see. So Bucky's favorite movie is, and this will just be blank. So now if you run this, check it out. Emily's favorite movie is The Notebook, Bucky's favorite movie is blank, and of course if we wanted to give him a favorite movie then we can do that as well. Might as well just do that. So Bucky's favorite movie equals Good Will Hunting. So now as you can see, each module can have their own copy of anything that we want. So again, this is called an object factory, and essentially what it is an object that is responsible for creating other objects. Why would we do that? Well, then we don't need to share this entire bit of code among every other module. They can each have their own custom copy. So there you go. Thank you guys for watching, and well, see you next time. Alright guys, welcome back, and in this video I want to show you how to create a really simple HTTP server. So remember that Node.js, it's a little bit different than plain vanilla JavaScript, because plain JavaScript was made for the web browser. So if you're just on a desktop or a laptop chilling in your living room, you could run some JavaScript and that's all good. But the code that we write in these next couple tutorials, this is code that's going to be on a server. So in other words, whenever you create a website, people are going to try to connect to that server, wherever it is, make a request for, let's say, like some like a web file or web page or some info from your database, whatever, and your server is going to be responsible for looking at the request and sending them back some information or some files, whatever. So that's actually how you can picture it. Actually, let me go ahead and right click and make a new file, maybe a little bit easier to understand. Server.js. So this is, let me clean this up, and actually we don't even need this app.js. We'll just run everything in this server.js file. So yeah, I know whenever I'm making these tutorials I'm on a Windows machine just sitting in my room. However, think of it like this. The code that I write in IntelliJ in these next couple tutorials, this is code that's going to be on the server, and whenever I'm using the browser, just think of me of like some user who's trying to connect to your server, like, I don't know, like over in California or wherever. So again, this is code that's going to be on the server, and when I hop over to the browser, I'm just some user trying to connect to your website. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, if you think, alright, making a server sounds really hard, we probably need to download some like operating systems like Apache. I heard of that before. I probably need to stick that in there somewhere. Well, it is actually incredibly easy, and that's one of the things I really love about Node.js. So one of the things that we need is the HTTP module that's already built in. So require HTTP, and I'm just going to store it in a variable called HTTP, and check this out. The only thing that you need to do to pretty much turn your Node.js code and pretty much create a server is this. Your HTTP object, call a method called createServer. Now, the parameter of this takes one thing, and that's a request listener. Essentially, this is going to be your callback, or what code do you want to run whenever a user tries to connect to your server. And of course, this function that we write in here is going to be something like send them back a web file or a web page or some info from our database, whatever. So we didn't code this yet, but I'm just going to call it like on request. And also, another thing I want to point out is whenever they connect to your server has to be listening for a request. So I'm just going to say listen, and inside here, how the heck did that pop up? Inside here you just put the port number, and I'm just going to put 8888. Now another thing I want to do real quick is whenever we start this program, I just want to log something out in the terminal just so we have a little indicator that, alright, the server is now running. So I'll put console.log, and I'll just put like server is now running. Alright, So what we did already is we created a server, and whenever we start this program, it's going to be listening for traffic or listening for users to request through this port. And it's going to just log something out on the command line. So whenever a user tries to connect to our server, what we want to do is we want to call this function on request. So since it's going to be looking for a function called on request, we of course have to build one. Now, whenever it calls this function, this callback function, it's going to pass in two parameters, two pieces of information. The first one is the request object, and this object is pretty much just information about the user's request. In other words, you can learn things like what information were they trying to get, what web page were they trying to connect to, all that stuff. Any information about the user's request, we can access through there. Now the other object we need is response. So our response is the object that we can send back to them. So if they're like looking for a web file, we can send it back through the response. We can also send like status information, like okay, the connection was good, or we couldn't find what you were looking for. Here is a nice old error for you, whatever. So again, the request is from them. The response is what we're sending back, and hopefully it's like a web file or something like that. So the first thing I actually want to do is this. I just want to print something out so we can visually see what's going on. So whenever a user makes a request, I'm just gonna log out a user made a request. Pretty creative, I know. And actually, let me show you guys something cool. And this is actually something that confuses a lot of people. And I'm not gonna explain what it is right now, but whenever I run this, there's a little weird thing that you might not expect. Something happens twice, and you may think it only should happen once. I'll explain what's going on in a second. But whenever a user makes a request, the first thing I'm going to do is print something out in our terminal, just so we can visually see what's going on. And then I'm going to start building my response, what I'm going to send back to them. So for the response, the first thing I want to do is write head right there. Alright. So before I hit enter, check this out. This takes a couple different parameters, a status code. Now whenever you are sending something back to the user, there are already a bunch of status codes that you may already be familiar with. 200 is pretty much the status code that says, hey, everything went okay, you requested something, I'm sending it back, no problems. You probably already know of 404 as well. This means that whatever you requested, I couldn't find what you were looking for. Something probably didn't go according to plan. And there are a couple other ones as well, and we'll talk about those later on. The next piece of information is just header information, and it says what type of data are you sending back to them. And for now, I'll just send like a simple plain text. And these can also be like files, but for right now, what you do is you call context, type in capital letters, and then since this is an object, you need a value. So text plain, and that with a semicolon. Alright, so what we're saying right here is we're going to send you back a response. Everything is going good so far, and the type of data that I'm sending back is just plain data, just like a string. So now you actually have to write some string or some data. So response write pretty much allows you to write your response, and I'll just say like here is your response, whatever, or here is some data. I'll just say that. Alright, and now the last thing you need to do is you need to call response.end, and this just signifies that the response is ending and it actually sends it off. So let's go ahead and run this and check out what's happening. So server is now running, and actually before I do that, let me stop it. So this program isn't running yet because I just stopped it, and check it out. So obviously whenever a user wants to connect to it, this would eventually be some web address, but for right now we're just running it on localhost, which is the address of whatever program, your server, and port 888. And remember in like the first tutorial we set everything up. So if we just try to connect to it right now, try to refresh it. It says this web page is not available. It's saying that because, remember, this is pretty much our server, and our server is not running yet because, even though I just ran it, I stopped it. So we pretty much have no server or no program running right here. So check this out. Whenever I run it, it says server is now running, and this program is now listening for users to connect. So now look what happens when someone connects with it. It prints out here is some data. Why did that happen? Well, check it out. So it was pretty much listening for a user to connect, and whenever they connected, it just logged out a user made a request, and then it printed the URL of pretty much what web page they were trying to access. So it says, okay, user made a request, and the user made a request favicon. You see, I only refreshed the page once, or tried to connect to it once, so why did it make 2 requests? And this is the thing I wanted to point out, and it tricks a lot of people up. Whenever a user connects to your computer, or excuse me, whenever a user from wherever they are, they try to connect to your server, what your browser does is it first sends a request for whatever page they were looking for, in this case just the home page, and it also makes another request behind the scenes for the favicon. In other words, this little icon right here, you see the new Boston is like a little red square with an arrow, and GitHub is like a little black cat or whatever. So a lot of people, whenever they're first starting out, they're like, why is, it's sending like a double request every time? That's why. So, I just thought I'd explain it. So again, moving on, whenever we get a request from a user, what we say is, okay, hop over to this code and pretty much run this chunk of code, this callback method right here. So first I'm going to log something out, and then I'm going to set up my response. Says, okay, everything's running good so far. I'm going to send you back some plain text, and then we just send them back the text or whatever information they were looking for. So that is why we got this little bit of code. And again, I'm going to refresh this, or actually let me just hit enter and go there again. So now that would signify another user trying to connect, and look at what happens. We now get another request from another user. So again, there you go, and eventually we're going to be sending back files instead of just little stupid strings of data, but now that you understand the basics of it, yeah, that's that. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Alright guys, in the last video, what we did is we learned how to set up a really basic server. In other words, we typed a little bit of code, and what we can do is we can pretty much sit, listen for user requests, and whenever a user wants to connect to our website, we send them back a really simple little string of text. Pretty amazing. So my guess is that if you're learning Node.js, you probably want to build programs that are, a little more interesting than this. One of the main things people want to do is they want to learn how to host a website. So of course, instead of sending back a little chunk of text, we need to send back files, HTML files, JavaScript files, CSS, and then the browser can of course interpret them just like, a website like this. So let's go ahead and learn how to send back actual files instead of just plain stupid text. So what I'm going to do is just delete everything right here, and in this tutorial I'm just going to make like a really simple HTML file and show you guys how to send that, but the concept is pretty similar for any type of file with some little differences, and we'll talk about those later on. But for right now, create a new HTML file by clicking, show you guys, right click public, new HTML file, and I'm just going to name this like index.html. So this would be like the home page of our website, and hit OK. Now the cool thing about IntelliJ is it pretty much gives you a template by default. So let's just create something real stupid. I'll give it a title of the new Boston, and in the body I'll just say like, wow, this site is awesome. Alright, so that's probably going to be pretty boring, but whatever. And actually, let me go ahead. For some reason, I like to have my HTML files on left and my JavaScript files on the right. So now, what we want to do is whenever they connect to the server, we pretty much want to send them back this HTML file. So how do we accomplish that? Well, the first thing that we need whenever we're working with files is the FS module. Remember, this is the file system module, and we saw a quick example of that in, I don't even know what tutorial it was, but before. And if we just require that, then there you go. So now we can work with the files on our computer, and whenever you're hosting a website, one of the first things you want to do is you want to build a 404 response. So for example, whenever they try to connect to our website, we have one HTML file, our homepage, our index.html. However, what if they try to connect to like about.html or like movies.html? Well, we don't have those files, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to send them back a 404 response. In other words, a response if things go bad. So I'm just going to put like 404 response, and let's set this up quick. So function, I'll just name it like send 404 response, and the only thing we need to pass in here is our response object, or what we're sending back. So this is actually going to be pretty similar to what we learned before. Response, let me get this out of the way. So response right head, and the status code for this is of course 404, and the object of course is going to be content type text plain. So we're just going to print out a really simple message. Why is that underlined? Because I spelled response wrong. Alright, there we go. Alright, so if they try to request a file that we don't have, I'm just going to print out like error 404 page not found, whatever. So response, what data, every freaking time. Alright, error 404 page not found, and then take your response and end it so it knows that we're done writing the data and it can send it off. Alright, so hopefully we never have to call this function, but if they request a file that we don't have, then this is what we're going to send them. Now on request, what we're going to do is we'll say handle their request, or handle a user request. Alright, so essentially what this function is going to be responsible for is listening for a request and sending them whatever file that they're requesting. So the first thing we need is just an if statement. Now inside this if statement, we're going to inspect the request. So if you call request, you know how I told you guys in the last tutorial, the request object has information about what exactly they want. Do they want a file? What are they looking for? So first, let's make sure that the method is equal to get. And if you guys don't know about get and post, there are pretty much different ways that you can connect to a server. Well, this isn't really a tutorial about that, so I don't want to waste your time. You guys probably already know, I'm guessing. So get is pretty much the standard way that you connect to a website. Post you use whenever you're submitting forms, and there are other ones like put and delete that aren't really that common, but whatever. So we'll make sure that they're just using get, nothing fancy here, and we're also going to want to look at the request URL. So remember, we actually printed this out in the last tutorial, and of course the first thing that they request is what web page they're looking for. That was the obvious one. Now we also saw that there was a request behind the scenes for the favicon. That's one that we don't really want to worry about. So we're first going to check the request URL, and if it's equal to /, that means that they're just trying to connect to the home page. /. Simple enough. So if they're trying to connect to the home page, let's just send them back that file. So response right head, why is that not popping up? Right head 200, and let me do this. Too lazy to type all that. Alright. So unlike before when we just sent out a plain string of text, what we want to do now is we actually want to send back a file. So instead of text plain, what we're going to send back is text HTML, which pretty much means an HTML document just like that. Now, in order to send back an HTML file, what we want to do is we actually want to send back something called a readable stream. And that's just because a basic response is just sent back in one chunk of text. However, this file, we don't know how big it is. Our programmers or developers are usually going to change the size of this, whatever. So we want to send it back in a stream, and that's just for better performance and to ensure that we don't have any errors. So for our file system object, which is fs, the first thing we want to do is create a readable stream. So we're essentially going to read this file, which is index.html. So now we're reading that file, and then we want to call a function called pipe, and this just means pipe it out or write it out or feed it out, whatever you want to call it, the stream to the response object, which is pretty much the response that we're sending back. So what do we want to pipe out? This bit of information, we're going to send it out through the response object. So I'm going to add one more condition right here and check it out. Of course, we know whenever they make a request, we call this function, and then we check, are they trying to connect to the home page? If so, send them back index.html. Else, that must mean that they were trying to connect to a web page that we don't have, maybe like bacon.html. We don't have one of those. So in that case, we're just going to send a 404 response, and of course, we need to pass along our response object. So that's actually it. Let me go ahead and run this bit of code and check it out. Our server is now running. Alright, we're browsing the web, pretty cool. The new Boston, that's a pretty cool site. However, let's go to this hot new site I learned about called localhost 8888. It's supposed to be the hottest thing to hit the web. Go back and look at this. The greatest site ever. So again, what we did here is whenever we connected to the home page, the server, which is running, don't really need that, it looked at our request, says, yep, you're using Git and you requested just the default home page, so I'm going to serve you, or I'm going to respond with this file right here, index.html. So that's our response. And also say that we wanted to I don't know, say that some user was goofing around and they tried to go to like corn bacon.html. Well, obviously that web page does not exist. We didn't make it, so check it out. That's when we get our error 404, page not found, and you can probably figure out they did make a request successfully, so they did connect to the server, no problem. However, we checked the request, we didn't have anything for them, so we just redirected them to this function and sent back a 404 response. So there you go, pretty simple. That's the core basics of creating a really simple web server or file server. So yeah, if you have any questions, ask me on the forum. If not, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Alright guys, now that we know the basics of how to set up a really simple web server, what I want to do is I want to introduce you guys to a server framework called Connect. So a lot of the functionality that we would commonly write to handle user requests has already been written for us and packaged up into a nice framework called Connect. So how do we install the Connect module? Well, the first thing that we need to do is go down to this terminal right here, and you guys are gonna probably cry when you see how easy this is. Type npm install Connect, and that's it. What this is gonna do is it's gonna go on the internet, look for this package called Connect. It already knows exactly where to go, download it, and install it and configure it with your project. So check this out. We can now use Connect. One line of code. How easy was that? Now this little installer right here, it's actually, I don't want to say more complex, but we have some additional options, and what I'm going to do is devote an entirely new tutorial to showing you guys how to use it and all the different options and commands you can use. But for right now, check it out. Again, what that did is it went and downloaded and installed Connect. So if you look in your Node_Modules directory, we now have it all right there. Pretty stinking awesome. Did a lot for one line of code, eh? Alright, so now let's figure out how to use this module and what it's all about. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is actually just require it, import it. So require, of course it's called Connect, and in this example what I'm going to do is I'm also going to use HTTP from the last tutorial. So before we can start using this Connect framework, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a Connect dispatcher. Now, this is pretty much the core Connect object, and you can think of it as a function that just takes the request and response arguments. So whenever the user makes a request to your server, it's going to look to this right here to pretty much determine how it wants to handle that request. So if you just name it app, and this is actually pretty standard to name an app, and all the Connect examples online, that's what they do. So I thought might as well follow convention. Again, since this is essentially just a function that takes the request and response argument, whenever we're setting up our server, HTTP create server, what we can do, and actually I probably typed that too fast. Alright, so as you can see, create server, it takes a request listener as an argument. So that argument is actually this object right here. Simple enough. And now, of course, we need to give it a port to listen on. I think last tutorial we used 8888. Might as well stick with that one. And after our server is up and running, might as well log something out to verify it. Server is running. So right now, if we try to connect to our server, nothing is happening. But if we run this bad boy, then check it out. So we have a connection, but right now it says cannot get / This means that it can't even get the home page because obviously we just have like the really bare basics right now. Alright, let me adjust a little bit. Alright. So essentially, like I said, whenever we connect to the website, to our server, what it's going to do is in our code, it's going to look to app right here to say, how do you want me to handle this request? That is embarrassing. Okay, let's continue here. Pretend that didn't happen. Alright, so the first thing that we can do is we can use a method called use. So inside here, we write a little chunk of code, and the code to handle user requests is called middleware. So at first, let me just make something really easy. We'll call a function called doFirst. And of course, these functions, they take the request, which is the user request, the response, if I could type, which is the response that we're sending back, and they also take a third optional parameter called next. And I'll show you guys in like 2 minutes why we need this third parameter. So just so we can have something going on, whenever they request, whenever they make a request on a server, we'll just do something really stupid and log out the word bacon to the terminal. Alright, so that is pretty much how we can set all that up. Again, we don't even use the request, response, or next right now. I'm just showing you guys a real quick example. Server's running. We just refresh the page and check it out. It says bacon. Pretty stupid. It seems like we could do that before. So what is one of the benefits of using Connect? Well, one of the reasons people like this is because you can actually take this middleware and stack it on top of each other. So in other words, whenever you have a stack of middleware, these functions can get executed one by one after each other. So you can actually have a function called doFirst and another one called doSecond. Now that's where this next parameter comes in. And actually, let me copy this real quick. Alright, so now we have two pieces of code, two functions that we want to run, doFirst and doSecond. So if we type next, and for the second one, we'll just log out tuna. Alright, so what's going on here? What is this next keyword? What is this stack and nonsense I was talking about? Check this out. Actually, let me stop that. It's annoying me. Alright, not running. Beautiful. Alright. So whenever the user connects to our website, whenever they make a request to our server, what's going to happen is it's going to say, okay, app, how do you want me to handle this? So it's going to go up to this app object, and it says, you obviously want me to use this function, doFirst. So what it's going to do is it's going to run first, doFirst, and then it's going to look for a method called next. If it has this method, then it's going to go to the next object in the stack, which is due second. So hopefully, if I didn't do anything stupid or forget any semicolons, whenever I run this and a user makes a request, it's going to call bacon, go to the next one, which is due second, and tuna. So let's see what's going on. Bacon and tuna. Now again, you don't always have to have this next right here. What you can do is you can actually make some kind of logic. Again, this would typically be something like you're going to test if the user has permission to do this thing or that. But if they actually, I guess that's a Python code. I'm a little used to typing Python. But what you can do is you can actually decide if you want to call this next method or not. So let me clear this out and run this again. And let's make another request. So again, if you don't call it, then of course this second object in the stack, it never gets called. And that's why tuna was never written. Alright, so that was pretty interesting, I guess, but not really that useful. Still don't really understand why Connect is so popular. Well, to be honest, that was just a really simple demo. The reason that people love using Connect is actually for this. In addition to just using, some plain old middleware, what you can also do is have an optional argument of a path. So let's say that you had a couple different pages on your website. This was the home page. It's not running right now, but we'll say that we have a profile page and a forum, whatever. So what you can do is you can actually type the path profile, and then we'll just make a function called profile after this. So essentially what's going to happen here is whenever the user makes a request for the profile page, you're going to call a function called profile. So this might be displaying their profile picture or whatever. So function profile, I'll just say in response. So again, I'm not actually going to display a picture or anything. I'll just log out user requested profile or something. Alright, so again, whenever they go to their profile, it will run this function, and just so I can show you guys that we can have more than one, we'll say that we have a forum as well. Make another function called forum, and we'll say user requested forum. Alright, so now let's kick this off and check it out. So our home page, again, nothing new there. However, if we go to profile, and let me show you guys this. So we don't have anything logged out right now. However, I'm going to go to profile, hit enter, and check it out. User requested profile, and it'll be the same thing for forum. Again, what we would do here is actually display something on the screen for them, but that is pretty much how we would handle different user requests depending on the path. So eventually what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using logic similar to this to inspect the path to figure out what request is the user making, what web page are they trying to go to, and then we're going to be able to call a function that displays the HTML, the CSS, and all the brains behind our app in a nice, neat way. So there you go. Thank you guys for watching, and don't know what I'm going to be talking about in the next video, but it's going to be awesome, so I'll see you then. Alright guys, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you guys about Express, which is one of the most popular web frameworks for Node. However, before we begin, I need to tell you a story. So I was taking a shower this morning, and I got undressed, and I was standing in my bathroom. My shower was running, I was ready to hop in, and right before I did, I was just looking in the mirror, and I noticed this little it was like a white little stringy thing across my stomach next to my belly button. And at first I was freaking out. I'm like, is this some kind of vein, or that doesn't look right, something must be wrong with me. And I started worrying that something was wrong, and then I realized that I was just eating a piece of pizza on the computer with my shirt off about an hour earlier, and a piece of cheese must have fallen down and crusted to my stomach. So yeah, some of my health issues were, just a piece of cheese. But, you know what, let's just get on with this tutorial. Please do not judge me. We're not here to judge, we're here to learn Node and Express. Alright, What is Express? Express is a web framework. What's that mean? Well, we already know whenever we have a framework, a lot of the functionality that we need, it means someone else has written it for us so we can use it. Pretty awesome. Also, the entire structure for our projects, in other words, how we organize our folders, our files, it's all set up for you in Express. So without further ado, let's go ahead and learn how to make one. From IntelliJ, if you go to File, New Project, what you can do here is you can choose, let me move this so you can see. Alright, in the little section down here, it's Node.js and npm, and choose Node.js Express app. It's our only option, and click Next. So from here, it's really easy. You just give it a project name. I'm going to name mine Megan. Why? Well, because Megan is a cute girl that works at McDonald's, and I always see her, but I'm too afraid to ask her out. I don't know why. I guarantee she would say yes, but this is the most random tutorial ever. Alright, whatever. Name your project, whatever you want. Where do you want to put it? This place looks good. Now, the one option I do want you to change is this. For the template engine, what this essentially is pretty much how you're going to write your plain HTML templates. So Jade is kind of a weird, it's not weird, it's actually pretty popular, but the one I'm going to be teaching you guys is EJS. It's really easy to understand. It's pretty much just like HTML. Jade, it kind of looks like Python. If Python and HTML had a baby, that would be Jade, but we're going to go with EJS, and you guys are going to see what this is in a second. But click Finish. Alright, just open it in this window. Core modules, configure it for this project, and boom, we are good to go. So what that does is it essentially sets up your bare bones project. So all of the default basic files and directories that you need, if you expand your project, you can see them right here. And I know what you guys are thinking already. Okay, this is a lot of crap. We were working with like one file before. Now I'm going to have to understand what all of this crap is. Well, I'm going to give you guys like the 2-second overview right now. But first, before I even begin, double click, actually expand bin right here and double click this www.js file, and if you right click this, you can run it right now. And the port by default I believe is 3000, so go to localhost 3000 and check it out. So if you see this, that means everything is good. If you don't, then make sure that you actually are running your project, and once it's running, verify that everything is set up correctly. We can start figuring out what all this crap is. So let me just collapse some of this so it's a little bit easier to follow along. Alright, so the reason, well, I guess I might as well explain it like this. I'll just go top down and explain what all these files are. This one, idea, this is just your IntelliJ settings. Nothing new, don't touch anything in there. That's just for your piece of software, your IDE. Bin, as you can see, there's one file in here, and this is the one where we had to right click and run to get our project up and running. And if you guys are like, you know what, I thought you said that app.js was usually the main file, like the main starting point. Well, whenever you're working with Express, this www file right here, this is pretty much your startup script. And it has a bunch of core settings, pretty much saying create a server, tell it what port to listen to. And what this file does is it actually kicks off app.js. So again, this is your startup script with some really base settings, but this, like I said, is really the core behind your project, and we'll get to that in a second. So that's what bin is. Now these node modules, these are all of the modules in addition to the core modules. So again, anytime we use Node, we get all of the core modules, and we can see those in the external libraries. Now, what Express did is it downloaded a bunch of additional modules that we need in addition to the core modules, and if we ever need any more core modules, or excuse me, any more modules other than the core ones, then those are going to go in the node_modules directory as well. Now public, what this is essentially files that the users are going to be able to access. So this is going to be all of your images, your JavaScript, your style sheets, all that stuff. So anything for the public, not directly related to like your server files, because obviously You don't want to give, every user access to this file. So again, anything that the users are going to be able to access goes in public. Now routes, these are pretty much the brains behind each page. So by default, whenever we just set it up and made that quick little template, it gave us two pages by default, the index and users. And if we go to users real quick, we can see. So again, this is just a really basic demo page, but whatever. And obviously those are the only two pages we have so far. So if you go to something like bacon, that doesn't exist. It gives us an error. Let me open that back up. All right. So whenever you're making a project, you're going to have a bunch of different pages, as you guys can expect. Each different page typically is going to have its own route file. As you can see, they're pretty simple. They're pretty much saying, well, I'll explain exactly what a route is later on. Pretty much think of it like the brains behind each page. Now the views, as you can probably already expect, is the view, in other words, the HTML for each page. Now index, right here, you see it has HTML, head, body. I'm sure you guys know HTML. And this is what I was trying to explain whenever I was talking to you guys about the difference between Jade and EJS. With EJS, we include JavaScript with these weird little symbols, and I'll explain in detail what these symbols mean. But with Jade, it doesn't look like HTML at all. It just looks like a bunch of words and kind of like Python. But again, we don't need to worry about this. Just remember that in your EJS files, you pretty much have plain HTML, and anytime you want to include whether it's just some variables or JavaScript or anything in addition to HTML, you use these weird symbols, and I'm going to be explaining in detail what they are later on. So again, that is pretty much the bare basics of it. So again, this is your startup script. Whenever it gets called, it's going to set up your server and kick off app.js. And in the next tutorial, I'm going to be explaining all this code. And I know it sounds boring, but trust me, it's not as confusing as it looks. There's just a lot of stuff, and I know there are a lot of files, but it's not really confusing at all. There's just, some things we need to go over first. So if you guys feel overwhelmed right now, don't worry, I'm going to explain everything perfectly. Maybe I'll tell you another story about cheese falling on my stomach. Who knows? But for right now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Alright guys, so before we start learning anything new, before we start typing any more code, let's go ahead and figure out what all of this existing code is doing. So I already told you guys in the last tutorial, as soon as you run this project, right click and run, what's going to happen is it's first going to call your startup script right here. Now all this is doing is it's setting up your server, all the basic configuration settings for your server. It's telling it what port to listen to. In this case, as you can see, 3000, so that's why we need to go to this address for the home page. And then after that, after www.js is done, what it does is it kicks off app.js. So just like before, app.js is the core foundation of your Node.js project. So essentially, whenever a user comes to your website and makes a request, app.js is going to look at that request and, depending on the URL, figure out how to handle that response appropriately. So right now, whenever we just set up this project, we got two simple web pages. We got the home page, that's the one you're looking at right now, and I also showed you guys you got this other page called users. So let's figure out exactly the workflow of what happens whenever the user requests this users page. So what's going to happen is they say, hey, I want to go to users. So app.js says, okay, let me figure out how to handle that. So I'm going to scroll, and just like before, whenever we were learning about the Connect framework, it's going to look at app, and this object is going to be responsible for determining exactly how to handle that request. So we see that we have two options right now, / and / users. This means home directory. Whenever they want to go to the home directory, call this object routes. Whenever they want to go to the users directory, which we did in this example, is just going to call the object users. Alright, so what's users? Well, if we scroll up here, users and routes, these are pretty much just other files. So users is going to require this middleware right here, and let's look at what that is right here. Users, and if they go to the index, it's going to call this little script. So in the case of users, what it did is it called this file, and all this file does, as you can see, as a response, it sends out respond with a resource. And that's why we got that respond with a resource. We can actually put something like I love pizza in here. And now when you run this again, the response would be I love pizza. So again, what's happening, and this is pretty much how we're going to build new pages in the future. Whenever we want to make a new page, we have to let app, this object, know about it. For example, we'll say like app use profile or something, whatever page we're making. And then we have to make a new route, which is the brains behind it. And our brains are going to be a little bit more complex than this, but for right now, the response will just send them this response. And also, typically, what's going to happen instead of just sending a response right here, and we can actually see this in index. Let me go back to index right here. What the brains or your routes are going to do is it's pretty much going to render a view. Now these views are, like I said, the HTML pages. So in this case, it was rendering index, which is your index EJS file. So let me actually put this in left and right, and you can see really clearly what's going on. So whenever the user requested the home page, what it did is it says, alright, where are the brains for my home page? In routes.index. What do you want me to do here? Well, I just want you to render the home page. So I'm going to display this home page. And obviously it just says welcome to whatever the title is, welcome to Express. And if we just want to change this to Bucky is awesome, then whenever you run that, that is why the home page would render Bucky is awesome. So that is pretty much the workflow. App.js handles the request, the brains, and the views. Simple enough. However, in the next tutorial, we still got to cover what all of this other code means. And it's actually really easy. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you then. Alright, Hostas, what I want to do in this video is I actually want to clean up this default project even more. And by that I mean, remember we got a home page and also this users page whenever we first started, but we actually don't even need this users page. So let me just rip out the code to make everything a little bit more simple. So let's see what code we don't need. In this app.js file, first delete this favicon because we won't be worrying about the favicons right now. And also delete line number 8, which I guess would be line number 9 before I deleted that. But again, this is just a requirement to that users file that we're going to be getting rid of. And let's see what else right here. Alright, so in line 24, which would have been 26, delete the line for the users because again we're going to be deleting that file, and we of course can't use that middleware if it doesn't exist. So delete those 3 lines of code right there, and also this users route. Right click it and delete it. Okay, so right now of course we don't have any users page, just the home page. And to verify that, if I restart this and try to go to users, refresh it, it doesn't exist. So exactly what I wanted, one single page. I think it'll be a little bit easier to explain if we don't have, all that extra crap. Alright, so in app.js, let's figure out what everything does. Alright, so we already know what this stuff is. Express, we learned about, that's what we're using. Path, we already learned about that in, it was like really early, like the 3rd tutorial or whatever, pretty much working with file paths. What are these other ones? Logger is actually a module used for logging out info in the terminal. So for example, you see this right here. It was logged out through the use of Logger, which they named Morgan. I don't know why, but they did it, whatever. Probably the creator was named Morgan or something. And now I'm getting off track, so let's continue. Alright. So cookie parser, you can probably already guess, is for handling cookies. Body parser, whenever you have to parse a text body or a JSON part or a JSON body, say party, that'd be cool, a JSON party, whatever. Alright, then that's what you use. Routes, we already know what that is. Pretty much the brains behind everything. Now this line of code you could probably understand from our Connect tutorial. What this does is it's pretty much initializing your app to use Express. In other words, we're saying let Express and let this framework handle all of the user requests. This little chunk of code right here is setting up how the views are handled, and if we chose Jade for like when we were first setting up our project, then it would of course use the Jade as the view engine, but we're using EJS, and again I'm going to be explaining to you guys exactly how to use EJS in, well, probably the next tutorial. But yeah, alright, so this little chunk of code we're going to see later as well. It's just setting up how data is logged and parsed. This right here is looking at your path. For example, we only have one page right now, so not a whole lot of options. But saying whenever the user requests this page using that path, then use this middleware, which is essentially index.js. Now, if you guys are wondering, alright, what's up with all of these error handlers? Well, what this little chunk of code does is it, as you can see, it catches the 404 error and it passes on to the next error handler. So just like a stack. Oh, I got like a chunk in my throat. So that's why it calls next, passing in ERR, because it's passing it through the stack. And if we ever wanted to make additional error handlers, that's why they threw this little comment right here. They say put them right there. Now this little chunk of code right here and this little chunk of code are both error handlers. In other words, whenever you're working on your project or whenever your website is live and you get a bug, some kind of error, then these tell it how to be handled. Why do we have two of them? Well, the only difference between these two is that you use this one right here during development, and you use this one whenever your website's live, and that's called production. So why would you need two different ones? Won't you just handle them the same either way? Well, check this out. You see right here, whenever we went to the website users, well, that doesn't exist anymore. So what it did is it printed out the stack trace. In other words, it printed out a detailed message of our error so we can pretty much find the bug. Now, whenever our website is live, let's say that the user, I don't know, clicks a button and something goes wrong. Obviously, you don't want to be spewing out a bunch of error messages and stack traces to them, because if like my grandma was using the site and she was looking at this, she would probably think someone was hacking into her computer. So that's the difference between these two. During development, when you're just working on your project, you actually want to see these stack traces because they help you find the bugs a lot easier. However, during production, you want to hide those, and well, there you go. And now that we're finally done understanding what the heck all of these files mean, we can get into the fun stuff. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Alrighty guys, welcome back, and in this video I want to talk to you about these EJS files. Now, as you can see, as we already talked about a little bit, this is pretty much the HTML, in other words, the view for your web page. Now, if you're scanning this real quick and you're saying, alright, I know HTML, yada yada, headings, paragraph, wait a minute, what the heck is this crap right here? I don't really recognize that. Care to explain, Bucky? Well, this is the EJS. By the way, EJS stands for Embedded JavaScript. So again, these files are pretty much HTML that you can stick JavaScript into. That's all they are. Nothing really too fancy about it. So as you guys can see, the syntax whenever you want to throw JavaScript in here is this. There's actually two different variations of it, and I'll explain the difference right now. So whenever you want to use a variable, for example, this title, as we can see, this title is equal to Express. So that's why whenever we display the title, such as in this heading, and on the title, actually, it says Express. So that's what that does. And anytime you want to use a variable, you use less than, percent equal sign, write your variable name, which is title in this case, percent greater than. Now, whenever you just want to use plain old JavaScript, and by that I mean anything other than a variable, such as loops, switches, if statements, basic JavaScript, you don't add that equal sign. So again, the equal sign is for variables, no equal sign whenever you're just writing plain JavaScript. Now, the next little confusing thing that probably pops up is this. Alright, so clearly we have a variable called title and it's equal to express. Explains why it's displaying right there. But where is that happening? Because shouldn't there be like JavaScript up here with some like variables being declared and set equal to some values? I don't see any JavaScript. So what's happening is this. Remember, whenever the user makes a request for this home page, what it does is it looks at this file right here, index.js. So what this file says is for this view, whenever the user tries to get the home page, what's happening is I want to use index as my view, and this behind the scenes tags on the EJS. Since we already set up our project to use the EJS views instead of Jade, it already knows to add that file extension, so you don't need to type it manually. So it says whenever they request the homepage, use index.ejs, and you can also pass additional information. In this case, it passed one additional variable, and that variable was equal to express. So now anytime we displayed title, which is a JavaScript variable, it displayed express. And just to show you guys one other quick example, actually let me clear out everything in this body right here. And let me clear in out this title. Alright, actually in the title I'll just type the New Boston static text and say that we want to pass in my name as Bucky. So now what we can do is in our EJS file, anytime we use the variable name, it will display Bucky. And in the body I'll just make like a real simple paragraph. And remember, that's less than percent equals, since we're using a variable, and the variable is called name. So now let me run this again and check it out. Bucky. And just to show you guys a real quick example of the other syntax you can use with just regular JavaScript, let me space this up a little bit prettier. Say that you're making something like an unordered list. Now, inside here, what you need is a for loop, or you don't need one, but that's what we're going to do in this example. We're going to make a for loop and print something out 5 times. Now, of course, that for loop is not a variable, it's just regular JavaScript, so you need to throw that in between these two little weird looking symbols right there. Now, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to write for, and then for my conditions, var I equals 0. I'll just say, what I say? I is less than 5, and I plus plus. Alright. So now I'm going to put my opening bracket right here, in my closing bracket right there, and any code in between here is going to get looped out 5 times. So let me just put some list item, and I'll just write the word tuna. Whatever. Now let me run that and check it out. Tuna, 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 tuna. Tuna, 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 chameleon. Alright. It's late. It's like 6 a.m. and I have to go to my mom's because it's Easter tomorrow. So I was like, maybe I'll try to sleep tonight. But then I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll just stay awake because if I go to sleep, I'm not going to feel like waking up. So anyways, that's how you do that. Again, EJS files. Really simple. They're just HTML that you can throw JavaScript into. Whenever you want to display variables, use the equal sign. Whenever you want to write plain JavaScript, don't use the equal sign. Simple as that. See you next time. Alright punks, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to show you how to add additional web pages to your project. So right now our website looking pretty bland. This of course is just the home page. It's the only page that we have. It says Bucky, tuna, 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 my 5 favorite foods. However, people are coming to this site and you're like, you know what, this is pretty cool, but I want to learn more about Bucky. I wish there was an about page, maybe a like his profile page, whatever. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Now, before we start adding a whole bunch of pages, we already know that we're going to need some kind of navigation system so users can actually click links and go back and forth between pages. Every website has it. So you're like, alright, I'll just write the links right in every single EJS file, boom, it'll be good to go. Well, here's the problem with that. What if we want to add a new link to the navigation menu at the top? Well, that means that we're going to have to go in every single web page and add a new link manually. So I'll show you guys how to take care of that problem too, where you only have to worry about it in one location. So these are the files that we're going to be adding. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click views and add a new directory. And I'm just going to call this templates. Now inside this new directory, what we're going to do is we're going to add one new file, and this is going to be for the navigation at the top. It's called header.ejs. You can name it navigation.ejs, but since it's going to be at the top, I think this is a little more clear. And alright, so before we start typing all of our navigation code in here, I just want to add the other files while we're at it. So the one other file that we're going to be adding in the views is, we'll just say we'll add like an about page. So we'll say about.ejs. So essentially our web page is going to have two pages, our home page and an about page. Once you learn how to add one additional page, you guys are going to learn how to add, however many you want, so no use doing it repeatedly. Now again, anytime we add a new view, we also need to add a new route, the brains behind this. So new file, and it's the name of your view or page.js. So here is what's going on. How can I organize this? Alright, let me do this. So we have app.js, the index view, or excuse me, the index route, the about route, the index template, and the about template, and of course the header.ejs is going to be our navigation that's going to go at the top of every single web page. So I'll just put some basic links in here, href, and let me just copy this a couple times. And I'm going to separate my links with a pipe symbol, and this is the little symbol above the enter on your keyboard. So let me actually add 3 links. Alright, so the first one, whenever they click it, it's going to go to the home page. The second one is going to go to the about page. And the third one, I'll just put link 3 because we won't make a page, we'll just make it a dead link. But I don't know. If we ever want to add a page, that's where it would go. Now, the path to the home page, as we already know, is just that /, and the path to this about page is about. And remember, you don't need to add the file extension because it already knows whenever we set up our project exactly what to do, taken care of for you. So now we have a pretty sweet navigation system. The first thing we need to do is, I say the first thing, but it's like 4 minutes into the tutorial, clearly not the first thing we're doing. The 18th thing we need to do is we need to include it in our index page, on our home page. So anytime we want to include a little bit of JavaScript, already learned how to do that. Just write include, and remember, the location of this, our navigation, is in templates, header.ejs. So include templates / header.ejs. So actually I can go ahead and run this right now and you guys can see what's going on. So again, this is our navigation, and if I inspect this, you guys can already see it took the code from header.ejs and it included it right where we wanted to. Pretty awesome. Alright, so now back to our project. What we can do now is actually just take this entire thing and stick it in about.ejs and clean this up a little bit. Alright, so in about.ejs, the about page, I don't want the same stuff as my home page because that'll look weird. I'll just say like just say heading 3 will be good. So I'll give it a heading of about. And what is something neat about me? So I'll say, hi, my name is Bucky. Let's see. I thought cheese from pizza was a vein and I was scared. And if you guys have no idea what I'm talking about, then you guys are missing out because you missed a good story in one of the last tutorials. Alright, so now we have a view for about an index looking sweet. Actually, let me change this title to about as well. Alright, so now what we need to do is we need to set it up first in app.js. So essentially what we're going to do in app.js is let our program know, hey, we made a new page, so whenever the user requests that page, this is how you handle it. It only takes 2 lines of code, pretty simple. And if you copy this, so this is for whenever you require the home page, we can just change this to about. And of course we need to change the variable to about. So now the about variable is equal to this file right here, simple. And if you go down here, add one other line of code, about. Alright, so what we're saying here is whenever the user makes a request for the about page, use this right here. And this is just, as you can see, this file right here, which is empty, but we can change that right now. And this is actually going to be really similar to index.js. So we can just paste that in there. And what do we want to do here? First of all, right now, what this is saying is, change my comment. Right now what this is saying is whenever the user requests the about page, then display the index view with this information. And of course we don't want to display the index view, which is this. We want to display the about EJS file, so I'm just going to change that to about. And what information do we really want to pass in? We don't need the title. Actually, let's do that. We can set the title equal to about, and we'll keep the name equal to Bucky. So now over in our view, what we can do is this. Instead of the title, we can use the variable title, and we can actually stick this in our heading as well. And for my name, instead of typing that, we can actually just use that variable. Simple enough. So let me go ahead and run that bad boy, refresh it, and check it out. So the home page looks good. About, awesome. It looks like our variables are being passed through right there and right there. Link 3, of course, it doesn't do anything because we didn't make any page for it. But now we have a sweet navigation system looking awesome. And the cool thing about this as well is anytime we want to make any changes to the navigation system, we don't have to make any changes on every single page one by one by one. All we have to do is change it right here, and it automatically updates on every other page. Pretty awesome. So there you guys go. That is how you add additional pages. Again, remember just to add a new view, a new route, and make sure everything is set up correctly in app.js. Again, just 2 lines of code. And yeah, simple as that. You're good to go. So thanks for watching, and well, that's it. End the tutorial. What are you still doing here? Just go to the next one. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Alrighty guys, in this video, I'm going to show you how to use JSON data. Now, of course, the first thing we need is JSON data. So if you already are using an API, then go ahead, grab some data from that. Any data is going to work fine. However, if you don't and you just are, watching this video wanting to learn, then I already uploaded a little sample file right on my GitHub page. So github.com/BuckyRoberts. Go to source code from tutorials, and inside Node.js, of course, this tutorial is 21. You're going to see a file called videodata.json, and you can actually just copy all this. Short little chunk, 50 lines of code, and go back in IntelliJ, and of course we need to add this to our project. So where we want to add it is actually just in the main directory. So if you right click Megan or whatever your file name is, new file, I'm just going to name it videodata.json, and paste this in there, and boom, look at that. And actually what I want to do is I want to make sure this is all formatted neatly. So anytime you want to Or if you ever copy code from the internet for, I don't know, maybe some example code you want to include, and you paste it in and it's all weird, like the tabs are messed up and the spacings looks funny and stuff, what you can do is you can hit Control A to select everything, then Control Alt L, and what this does, it reformats your code. It doesn't like change your variables or anything. It just pretty much spaces it exactly like it should be. So this is already good, so that's why that didn't change. Beautiful. So now that we have some kind of JSON data, let's figure out how to use it. Actually, let me rearrange these tabs so it's a little bit easier to understand. And by the way, before I continue, I should probably explain what the heck this data is. This is just data from the API that we're working on for my site, and it is just data about this appetizer section. I don't know why I picked this, why the heck not, but basically it just has information about these videos, like the playlist titles, how many videos are in each, and you know, the name of each playlist, a little description about it, how many videos. Again, just real quick JSON data. That was the first thing to pop in. So yeah, there you go. Alright, so in order to learn how to include JSON data or even how to use it at all, we first need to understand something called local variables. Now this is a kind of confusing name because essentially what a local variable does is it allows you to make a variable that you can use anywhere in your program. So in other words, we can make a variable right here. Actually, let me show you real quick. So what does our website look like now? Alright, so this is the home page. This is the about page. Looks pretty cool. And let's say that we had some kind of point system and we wanted to display my points on every single page. Well, of course, we don't want to make a bunch of variables that are just going to point to the same thing because it will be kind of a waste. So what we can do is we can make one variable and we can display it anywhere we want in our entire project. So I'll show you guys how to do that. So in your app.js, right under this line of code right here, you can actually stick it anywhere. It doesn't matter as long as it's after app. Do this, app.locals right there, and now after this, you give it a variable name. And I'm just going to name mine points. Name it whatever you want and set it equal to however many points you think you deserve. I am pretty cool, so I think I deserve 8,713. And it doesn't have to be a number, it can be a name. Just make any variable that you want. But what this does is it makes a variable local to your app. And that's the kind of confusing thing. Whenever a variable is local to your app, it pretty much means a global variable that you can use anywhere in your entire program. So say that we wanted to display these points on the home page. Well, all we would do is make a new paragraph here. So let me just copy this. All we would do, just like before, is just type points right there, and that's it. So there you go, probably the easiest thing that you have ever been taught. Anytime you want to use something across any file, then what you do is you store it in a locals variable, you have a name, and you can use it anywhere. So why am I teaching you guys this when we're supposed to be learning about JSON? Well, that's what we're going to do with this JSON file. Now remember, a JSON file, all it is pretty much a JavaScript object. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this data, this JSON file, and we're going to store it inside a local variable, and we'll actually do that right now. So app.locals, and it doesn't need to be a variable such as a string or a number. It can actually be an entire file. So I'm just going to name mine video data and set this equal to require video data.json, and of course, since it is not the core module, we have to reference it properly and add our semicolon. So now what we can do is we can actually use this video data object anywhere in any of our templates, and it's essentially just equal to this right here, which is essentially just a JavaScript object. Pretty awesome. So let's say that on, I don't know, we'll just mess with my homepage right now. So on my homepage, we'll say that we wanted to display some info from this JSON file. So we'll just say we'll display the names of the playlist just to keep things really easy. So we can get rid of this right here. First of all, I didn't really like that anyways. Alright, so get rid of this. And actually, let me get rid of the points as well, now that you know how to use them. Alright, now remember, our entire JSON file, it can be referenced through the variable video data. So now we can just use it like any other variable. So video data, and what do we want to print out? So for the header, we'll just print out category name. Category name. And actually, let me change this to like heading 3. So hopefully this will print out appetizers and sides. There you go, appetizers and sides. So now what we can do in our unordered list is we can just make a real quick loop through the JSON data, and for each piece of information we can just print it out as a list item. So video data dot categories dot for each. And by the way, you're going to use the for each loop a lot whenever you're working with JSON data. There's no point in making a regular for loop, because then you got to count all the objects and then somehow use that as the value to determine how much to loop through. Just use it for each loop. It's a lot easier and it works perfectly. So inside here, actually let me add my semicolon first. So inside here we're just going to throw in a function, and the parameter for that function, we give it a temporary variable. Now this variable is going to represent each of these objects. So pretty much each category. So from there we can just say print out like the category name, or we can print out the view count, whatever we want to do. So just make sure everything is in the right place. Wow, sometimes autocomplete is a pain in the butt. Copy that as well. Alright, looks good. Make sure my tabs are good. Clean up that, and I'm going. Alright. So now, like I said, what we can do is just print out a list element or a list item for each one. And since this is a variable, percent equals item dot, what was it? Category name. Alright, so hopefully that autocomplete didn't mess anything up too bad. And it ran my incorrect thing. I want to run bin www. Alright, looking good. So again, here is the main category, the parent, and for each of these playlists, app, side dishes, whatever, loop through the JSON data and put out each bit of information correctly. So there you go. As easy as that. Pretty much we import some JSON data. We don't have to convert it to an object because it's already an object. The only thing we have to do is set it equal to some variable that we can use anywhere in our program, and we can just use it accordingly. This is like the easiest thing we have ever learned, and the only problem that we have right now is that this is actually a little bit too easy. So since that's the case, in the next tutorial I'll show you guys an alternative way of working with JSON data, and you guys might prefer it. So thank you guys for watching. See you next time. Alright guys, welcome back, and in this tutorial what I want to do is I want to show you guys how to pass data through routes. And it's probably going to be really quick. I could have taught you guys this in the last video, but whatever. And this is pretty much the problem that we have. So we already learned that what we can do whenever we want to work with JSON data is we can take this file or a reference to it, and we can store it inside a variable that we can use anywhere in our program on any page that we want. Simple enough. But here is the little issue, and it's not really a problem, like in the sense we don't have any errors, but this is kind of the thing that irks me a little bit. See, this app.js file, this is essentially the manager for your entire application. So what we're doing right here is we're writing a piece of code that is only specific to one single page, and we're sticking it in the file that is supposed to be responsible for managing your entire application. Well, that doesn't really make sense. Why wouldn't you just stick this in index.js, since this is pretty much the brains behind this web page? Wouldn't it be a little bit better that way? Well, yes, it would. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So we can actually cut this part because we need it, and we can actually delete all of that. And that brings me to another point. Anytime you have code that is specific to a single web page, then you want to stick it inside that route. Anytime you have code that you can use or reuse across multiple web pages, or in other words, your entire application, you want to stick it in app.js or some other kind of structure. But that's pretty much how your project is going to be set up. So anyways, moving on, in index.js, let's make a new variable, and I'm just going to name it like var vd. I know that usually stands for something else, but for right now, it can stand for video data. Alright, so we get a bad reference, and that's because our directory structure is a little bit weird. We actually need to have 2 dots right there, and whenever you have 2 dots, it means move up a directory. So again, we're in views, okay, it's going to look in here, nope, we actually have to move up, and then it can find our JSON file. So again, what we can do, since whenever we render index, we can throw in some additional values to get passed through to the template, we can actually just do this. VD, and actually let's do this. Video data, and we'll pass in VD, that way we don't have to rename anything, just like that. So now we can use the variable video data in our template, and it's equal to this JSON object. So now let me run this again, refresh. Hopefully nothing changes. That means we don't have any errors, and beautiful project structure. So again, what we did is, instead of using code that was only specific to one page and including it on every single page, we just threw in the page that needed it, and we passed it through the route to the template, and it's a lot cleaner this way. So again, like I said, this is a really short tutorial. So what I'm going to do to waste some time is I'm going to give you guys a challenge. So what I want you guys to do is this. You see how we pretty much looped through and printed out every single playlist? Well, I want you guys to figure out how to take these little chunks of text and actually make them into a link to the correct playlist. And I'll give you guys a little hint. So each of these playlists that we referenced, whenever you click it, the URL is this base URL in the category which is passed through in the JSON data. For example, the first one is 294, and you can see the category ID is 294, so on and so forth. So your challenge, if you can complete it, is to turn each one of these into a link to the proper playlist. And just don't do it manually. Just don't, type each link out using, Ahref. Do it programmatically. And once you guys are complete, then paste it right here. Again, if you're watching this on my website, then you can just say like the title can be challenge number 1 for Node.js or whatever, and you can paste your code right there. And another thing, thank God I am explaining this right now. Whenever you guys have questions about Node and you guys want to paste your source code, you're like, all right, this little chunk of code right here isn't working, I'm going to paste it in the forum. Please use the code tags. So the code tags, to get them, is this little symbol right here. Paste them in just like that. A lot of people, they just paste it plain text like this, and then it displays all funny like that. So again, whenever you're posting code in the forum, please use the code tags. And yeah, it'll save me a bunch of headaches whenever I'm trying to figure out your bugs for you. So for now, thank you guys for watching. As always, I'll see you later.